All right, guys. Welcome to the First Responder Playbook. This is one of the first individuals that when I started the podcast, I knew I had to have on Jeff Johnsgaard. Usually, I let I try to do an introduction, but I don't feel like I can do this one justice. So, Jeff, tell my audience a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, okay. Well, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to meet your audience, obviously, and hopefully I'll get to meet them maybe at ILETA or a conference or a training or something soon. So, Jeff Johnsgaard, short version, I guess, just retired recently, just about 21 years as a law enforcement in Canada. But I suppose the reason I kind of do podcasts and all the rest of it is because for decades now I've been kind of blessed, partially because I just met interesting and intelligent people and just stalked them until they became my friends, and just did a huge deep dive into continually learning what I didn't know about training, about personal development, about growth, about training other people, and that's taken me literally to four continents and multiple tier one organizations down to kind of the tier 99 level. As a metaphor, like the best of the best of the best, all the way to recruits. In week one, day one, and how do we teach them better, faster, stronger? How do we know we're doing things that are correct? How do we know it's optimal? What is actual learning? All these things. So I contract instruct. I mean, I have my own company now, right? I guess I always did. Moved to Florida from Canada, and I just still travel the world working for companies like For Science and the Reality Based Training Association. Ken Murray, that dude who wrote Training at the Speed of Life, and co-invented FX marking cartridges, and so that technology allowed him to get behind closed doors. And then I kind of rode the coattails in that way when I was wet behind the ears, didn't know what I didn't know. And so I'm not sure what exactly we're going to talk about today, but I have a pretty strong feeling it'll be something along the lines of how I believe, at least, that training, especially in law enforcement, to be a law enforcement trainer, it's really a profession inside of a profession. And I put my money where my mouth is all the time on saying, if you try it like this, I basically guarantee you better results, because I've kind of ran out of ways of doing it wrong. That's not true. I keep finding more, but I'm hopefully going to run out of ways of doing it wrong. Or as I say, I'm just looking for optimal, not less optimal, because right or wrong is gone for me. There's lots of things that intuitively maybe we were doing. We thought we're getting great results, but were they really, as is evidenced on the street after time down the road? And or maybe some things that I was doing that now I understand deeply the research or the mechanism underneath why those things actually worked, which in turn allows me to do them more deliberately. And so, yeah, man, I don't know. I guess it's not really my background necessarily, but that's kind of the reason I'm here. Probably ask me anything you want, and it's a pleasure.
Awesome. So, first and foremost, I always like to ask, how did you get into law enforcement? Did you enjoy it as a profession? And what was your absolute favorite assignment during your career?
Uh, yeah, I did enjoy my time in law enforcement. Ultimately, I wasn't enjoying it enough that it was fulfilling my purpose. And that, unfortunately, I read this book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And unfortunately, I say, kind of tongue in cheek, because several quotes and several things inside of that book. And for those who haven't read it, please give it a go. It's probably one of the best books on earth, full stop. Uh, but in it, Mr. Frankel said, life is not made unbearable by circumstances, but by a lack of purpose and meaning. And that really kind of gut punched me. And I had always been trying to learn what I didn't know. I'd always been captivated. We'd have to go all the way back to, martial arts. The summer of grade 11, I'd been training in multiple arts before that, but never anything past a couple of months or a year at most. But the summer of grade 11, I found this art that was much more esoteric and had this other stuff inside of it I completely didn't understand. And that really hooked me, and I was started to be captivated by all these things that were in front of me, the way people were, and not just to do with threat cues and pre-attack indicators, which I just had no idea of prior to that, but even more so, these, as I said, these kind of esoteric principles, these things. Anyway, it led me all the way down, fast forward several years, traveling to Japan and things like that, where, there's this Godan test. I'm just raising my arms above my head where there's going to be a big chop with this bamboo shinai, this bamboo fake sword. And you sit there underneath the Grand Master. And I had watched this happen for many years because I've been traveling to Japan quite a bit and training. And you quote unquote felt it and got out of the way, or you got cracked in the head. and I was kind of captivated by that. Like, what the heck is going on here? And so, as I said, so fast forward a lot of time in the martial arts and training. And the next thing you know, there I am sitting under there, having this done. And it just led me into this window of things that I didn't know. And they weren't like completely outside of a human being. They were just things that I didn't know existed. And so to be able to calibrate, or to be able to, we've all taken a hike and felt the pressure change and known a storm was coming. We've all taken we've all noticed whatever those things are. And, you can call them, as I said, threat cues or whatever, but just in tune with the environment and things. And so you fast forward now, answering your question more, in law enforcement, I have been really, I'll say, getting after it. And so, you got to remember, we're talking 20 years, but even 10 years before I left, so even 5-10 years as a cop, I was always training a lot more. I was always spending my own money going on courses, traveling to the United States and to other countries, not just reading books and things, but like literally spending money traveling and training in other like firearms and all the zoomy stuff, of course, defensive tactics, knife stuff, just all those things, martial artsy wise, but also a lot more than that. And when I read that Viktor Frankl book, it really made clear something that I've been feeling for a long time, is that I was not getting after it in a world-class way. And I wasn't, I guess the phrase, I'm sure it'll resonate. Unfortunately, I'm sure it will resonate for a lot of your viewers. You can't be a prophet in your own land. And so I was literally teaching courses that I wanted to bring to my own department, but my own department would only let me do slivers of things, or, wouldn't necessarily allow that to happen or not. And there was a lot of reasons for that, but some of the biggest ones were I worked for them, and so whether you're labeling it whatever, he must not have anything good because I've known him, or whatever, or I don't know. I mean, you could always go down that thought path, but by that point in my life, you got to I've been, being a Canadian, I had to pay for and gain work permits just to go to the United States and other countries, some of them, but definitely the United States, where the bulk of what I was doing was happening. And, I stopped counting at 50 grand spent on work visas and all the rest of it, in order to come and do my craft and get better at it. And more importantly, where my purpose was to share that with other people in the profession to help keep them safer, therefore, society safer, one of my highest causes and callings. And so again, I wasn't able to do that. And so that really led me to go, this work visa thing is going to turn into a green card, going to turn into a taking of a pension that is very crappy, and leaving the government cheese, the 100% paycheck, and moving to another country to allow myself to chase real purpose and meaning, and more getting after it, so to speak, in the honing of the craft. And I love working the tools and hitting the door and doing the thing. I love all that stuff, and I'm good at it. But what I'm really good at is getting good at it really fast. And what I realized was a natural offshoot of that was helping other people to get really good at it much faster. And so all in all, I did absolutely look back and enjoy law enforcement. I'm very jealous of those people who say I lived a life of no regrets, because I have many, but I have learned to not live in them, and to live in the now and feed forward. It's one of the things when I talk about feedback, I want the feedback to be intrinsic in the person. They can do it for themselves, and feed forward centric. What will I do next time? How will that go? That's the one. So that we're always looking to the in the present, looking to continue doing optimal or more optimal in the future. And so, I think I've only answered one of the three initial questions, but there's that.
That's awesome. How long did it take you in your career to realize that training's your passion?
Um, I think training is like the offshoot of my passion.
Okay.
And so that's how I feel right now, anyway. It's like, I want you to change. I want to change my relationship with food, and a six pack is what will happen. Change my relationship with food, and I'll just feel better. That kind of idea, like just as a metaphor. And so I think personally, I feel like I'm about growth. And if you're not growing, right, then so to me, I want to be growing. And there are kind of two ways to grow. And I just say it: optimal and less optimal. And so I just want to continually keep growing more optimally. And growth to me means growth in mind, growth in spirit, growth in relationships, growth in skill set, growth in body, right? Growth in and those types of ideas. And so training is a natural offshoot of that, because if you care about the mission and the people, which I deeply do, then you're going to want them to grow more optimal, right? And so, how do you do that? And that would be, a week of podcasts, right? So that means, for example, just even this is wonderful, but we're not having, we're barely having a conversation. Jeff's on send, and you're on, digest and talk mode, and no one out there in podcast land do I get to hear what has landed, and therefore what they got from what I said, and now to drive the next thing I will say or do, which would be more along the lines of an actual conversation, which is moving us towards training in my mind, right? And so you can talk to a group, but you can only teach an individual. I've talked to just about 500 at one time, but without my going into the audience and saying, hey, what did you get from that? How did that land? What resonates for you? What do you think? And starting to create a feedback loop like that, then there's no training, or there's no conversation even, because there's just send. There's not a loop created to continue that, right? So yeah, I believe that growth is my thing, and we can certainly, and I have certainly, said and done things that I regret, or were not optimal, or whatever, that kind of stuff. And I'm just trying to catch myself and to choose to go towards constantly more optimal versus less. I always make a joke. I got two pistol mag pouches, right? My first favorite and my second favorite. They're both my favorites. It's just this one's a little closer, right?
Yeah.
And so, talking to Colonel Grossman, I was very lucky to be mentored by him for a little bit, especially my writing. And that phrase, aim small, miss small, right? That is very widely kind of talked about in our profession and the rest. And he doesn't like it either, because words have meaning. And so if words have meaning, why are we talking about missing at all? Aim precise, be precise, for example. And now we start to really question language and communication, and therefore training or expression, and all those things. And that's what I do, just crazy, deep, rich, and meaningfully, is all that stuff. Why are you saying those specific words to that specific student in that order to this person right now, here, like this? Stuff I didn't even conceptualize existed, and it took me down a path of, hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming and just all sorts of things that I didn't know, that in turn made me understand what was going on for me, how to create better learning environments, and therefore for myself, therefore, of course, for other people in turn.
That's awesome. Um, I know just from knowing a little bit about you, You kind of said that you were blessed in like getting around a lot of people and learning from them pretty quickly. Can you kind of talk? Because I remember you taught the 360 CQB class, and I know you were like the extension of the guy that founded it, and then now you kind of took it over and teach it. Can you talk about a little bit about that for my audience and explain like why
Yeah,
that's important in today's law enforcement environment?
yeah, sure. I mean, so my company, I just rebranded, right? So the reason I did so was because everything up until that point was for a green card, permanent residency. And the US government granted me this thing called a special abilities green card. And so it's like, apparently it's quite a thing in that they told me there's not even like a dozen of them in law enforcement. It doesn't get me a can of Coke, but it allows me to pay taxes in Florida, right? Hey, I'm all for it. And so part of that meant that I was the guy in the world for this 360-degree CQD, close quarter defense, right? And so it's just simply a close quarter shooting. I'll call it a shooting position, but it's a system. It works really well from inside a vehicle, really well when you're up close to people, in a doorway or in a crowd or weapon retention, just stuff like that. But the reason I say that is because it's just a thing, right? So that's content, whereas process is the overarching thing I do. And that's the how. How do you train anything? How to work a mouse, how to do the gun thing, how to whatever. How do you do it in order to actually get great results and great performance in in the real world, right? So in time compressed, ambiguous, high stakes environments where you've got limited to no information, probably no actual good lighting, shock, surprise, and novelty, just and all that, and split seconds to do something. And that is where I thrive. So to train a part of the brain that reacts with something without thinking about it, right? And so if you've got time to think about it, now it's like cheating. And so I always say, I don't want you to react. I want you to respond. And there is a difference. And that might take us down a pathway as to I don't know, Force Science traffic stop study, for example, or something like that, where 90 out of 93 officers did something very, very not optimal when presented with as a driver presented a gun rapidly at a B pillar. They didn't know what was going to happen. But so we had wired in a not optimal response in those in those officers by doing traditional firearms training. By the process we used for training them, we wired a part of their brain, split-second decision making. Maybe you think of it as System 1, Daniel Kahneman's System 1 and 2, that rapid, intuitive, reflexive response that happens without thinking. And we did it. We didn't know we were doing it because of this is how we've always done it, firearms training. And so, so kind of getting back to this 360 CQD, and please, so my website is now, as I said, rebranded. So it's onpurpose.training or trainingonpurposebydesign.com, but that's so long, it's such a mouthful.
Right.
And so I've got these two products, right? How to go about training anything, and then this specific technique thing. But it's a system for using a gun really close up and inside of a vehicle. And so there's an online course and a manual and all sorts of stuff. I'm literally the guy in the world for that. I just taught a 40-hour instructor course to the Abbotsford Police. I'll be going to Italy in October to train some executive protection and some high-end military people there. I'm the guy for that. And so, but it's like a piece of Lego for every cop. It just automatically take that piece of Lego, click it on your battleship, and now when someone's grabbing at your gun, you can do this. If you're in a car and can't get out quite yet or whatever, you can aim like this. Then you get out and you do your traditional thing or whatever. But the how you train it together is what I do. And so I'll just reference back to that 40-hour instructor course in Abbotsford again, that from May. I was showing them how to use language and drills and how to stagger and develop the training. Given, I'm delivering it to in-service, I've got 8 hours, or I've got a 40-hour instructor course to teach instructors how to deliver that, or whatever it is. Show me the box it has to fit in, and I'll show you the best way to go about doing it. Here's the key point. as is evidenced by what those people are then able to recall and do in a novel environment, 90 days later or something like that. Long after most, quote, traditional training, we see a dramatic drop. Don't you remember anything, right, in our yearly in-service or something like that. So I use 360 CQD as a vehicle, metaphorically speaking, as a vehicle for not only giving someone just, pardon my French here, but shit hot and awesome skill sets right away. Like, hey man, oh wow, I'm shooting faster. I'm shooting on the move faster. I'm able to retain my weapon and deliver rounds in 360 degrees from a seated position. I mean, I just wasn't even able to do that before. Very quickly you are. So that's cool. But how you go about doing it is my real thing. Show me any skill set you want them to have, or show me some. I always say that, like, if I were to come to your department, hey, what problem am I here to solve? What are you seeing as not optimal? And that's why I've got these courses, right? Training on purpose by design, where it's a 3-day course, for example, that in my mind goes all the way upstream, and we do these drills. They're not like real big long scenarios. There's all this drilling, but it's done in a very, very specific way, and that's what I train people on, which then downstream, quote, fixes or optimizes all this stuff we see as not optimal. Failing to use cover when available. Post gunfight behavior is just atrocious. Heaven forbid there's some sort of decision making after shots are fired. Just all that stuff that we see as, quote, not optimal. And and so those are the two things I do. Happy to talk much more about that, of course, and the rest of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I tell people when I met you after getting to go through your hour and 45-minute class at ILETA that you have you're a doctor in practice. And I say that with love because like I'm working on my doctorate, but I feel like that like the way you can take in information and convey it to people, you really have a special gift in that you do it at such an advanced level that like it engages people. And like when you talk, like it's like, man, I could really learn something from this guy. And so like you make that intrinsic connection very quickly with people. So you have a gift, and I love that you recognize that like courses are great. Giving them that information is great, but going the why we do things is the next step. And like I feel like the longest time, I mean, you've been doing it a lot longer than me, but we just taught because that's the way it's always been taught. And now we're actually getting that empirical data behind it and saying, hey, we probably shouldn't be doing it this way. Or, hey, we've learned this new information. Let's do it a different way. And like, I feel like you're one of the forefront guys of that. And like, you've worked with some big names, like Force Science, for example. Like, I had, until I started going to iLead, I had no idea what Force Science was. But now, I sat through a couple of their classes at iLead and stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, there's just so much out there that I didn't know. And, it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose at first when you want to go beyond that initial, like, hey, let me teach this class. But it's needed. And I just love what you're doing. Like, how did you finally decide that's the route I want to go?
Well, to what specifically? Like for training or for
Well,
leading the department, or?
just the learning, the personal growth, and like learning that information of like this is why we do things, and then starting to teach other trainers. Because kind of like you said, training's a profession with inside law enforcement itself. You've got to train the next generation of trainers to make sure they train everybody else correctly. How did you decide that like this learning path is where I want to go of passing this information along to trainers specifically?
Yeah, man. Well, I suppose that was a path that ultimately led to that. But I mean, law enforcement is a unique animal. It's 3 to 5 years from now, everybody changes seats. At your department, so to speak, in your training section or whatever. Even if you had a training section, we had 450 sworn cops, And the training section finally, I mean, even just special teams, we grew towards where the TAC became full time finally, in the last few years. And the training section had a couple of people, only a couple of full time constables, and we had 60 part-time instructors, right? So I was always just a part-time instructor for my agency and or the academy itself, because you had 5 jobs, right? I mean, and that was just that. And so there's been some cool phrases that stuck with me. One of them is at 5 years is 0 time. And I went, oh, tell me more about that. So you've got a project, not a program. Okay, so a project. You've got a whatever training, reality-based training project, or what, I don't know, whatever it is. Insert the thing here. But until you've been doing it for 5 years, you've got a project. Meaning, it is not durable. It doesn't have its own budget cycle. It doesn't have. If everyone can change jobs and all your instructors, right, just all of a sudden switched or whatever, and it can still live on, now you've got a program. And I didn't realize that because every time someone kind of was a gifted trainer, they got in there and they started doing great things, but we weren't creating sustainability and durability. We were not creating the next generation of instructor. Here's why I named my company this, on purpose by design. We just got lucky, or on occasion we didn't, where that next person to take that job was gifted and as a trainer, or possibly not. And the program then got stagnant or took some drastic jumps backwards, or not. And so I often compare that to another force science study, for example, right? Putting on fancy eye trackers, looking at 7-year counter-terrorist members. In fact, that's an article on my website for free for your viewers. I called it like red dots on pistols. Are we training them optimally? But it was actually kind of a hidden. It's actually about this thing called game intelligence. This thing we really need to teach on purpose that we're not. It's not even conceptualized really. And so this article will have the screenshots, some pictures of what I'm talking about in it. It's for free in the shop. There's a couple of free articles in there, actually. Please feel free to download them. And so, we've got these counter-terrorist members doing these things under a very quick evolving threat, shoot, no shoot kind of situation. And we've got these more junior firearms trained officers. And what the elites did was they did a completely different skill set than the juniors did. Yet the elites were trained the same way as the juniors. So some big takeaways there. These junior officers did something not optimal. There's like 0% chance they were going to make a proper shoot, no shoot decision making. They were shooting way late after already being threat had fully evolved. They were being shot at, all the rest of it. Where these elite members were moving not faster, but sooner, because they had game intelligence. They knew what was likely to happen. They had concurrent activity. They were getting a weapon system out, shifting their eyes and attention. You'll see it in these screenshots, towards where the threat is likely to be to properly identify it, then making another shift towards where they wanted the bullets to go if they needed to shoot, for example. And so all of that occurring. But my thing again is that we had these elites rise to this new skill set, but it wasn't, Brent, on purpose by design. It was not because of the 7 years of counter-terrorist training. Those individuals, just like the instructors who became good, made individual adaptations along the way that they rose to that, because the lesson syllabus and plan of counter-terrorist training and SWAT tryout and whatever that we put at them, we lost tons of officers who never, quote, rose to that skill level. So it wasn't deliberate and purposeful. Tracking with me, right? Yep. And so what I then do is I reverse engineer what are all the great things that an expert is doing. How do we then go as far upstream or as early as possible, or teach these things deliberately on purpose? And as you've already mentioned, I'm informed. So I use these words specifically. I'm grounded in and informed by what the research says, but I'm not evidence or science based. I use it to go, this intuitively, like we see good things, but I don't just copy it, because honestly, I think there's only 2 or 3 studies I've ever seen that I would or even could copy. The rest of them, I mean, science by definition has to like live in a box over here. That's very, I mean, it's not how I would want to train people optimally.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's what I'm about. And so this idea of like game intelligence, which is sense making sense out of what we're perceiving, knowing what's important in a situation. I put it in my workbook. Let me just do an example quick. For those who are viewing this, I guess we can say it out loud for those who are just going to hear it. But if I said, hey, recruit, or, hey, Brent, ask me for my wallet. And then I'm just going to point the camera down, watch my elbow. And as I dig in my back pocket for my wallet, there it comes out my phone or wallet. But now if I say, ask me for my wallet, and as I put my hand behind my back and I pull a pistol out of my waistband, my elbow makes a massive, different, big old 90-degree elbow angle. That elbow angle is called a critical cue. But my young people, and a lot of my officers, period, don't know to look for the elbow angle, rather than what a different elbow angle would look like, rather than what it means in order to drive movement, concurrent activity, shifting eyes and attention with a weapon draw presentation. Is this a shoot? Isn't this a shoot? It is a shoot. Shift eyes and attention to where I want the bullets to go. All happening in the sliver of a second. So how do I train that on purpose by design? And then how do I train someone to understand how to train that on purpose by design? Now we're getting 3D level chess. But this is where I thrive and live. I mean, this is literally what I go to departments and academies to do.
That's awesome. Can you kind of you touched on it a little bit, the way you say things. You said you said it for a specific reason. Touch on that a little bit more, because the way you convey your message is very important.
Yes, it is. That's why I'm like podcasts. I love doing them, but I don't love doing them because I'd rather be interacting with human beings, right? Language is an imperfect form of communication. So give me a slow trigger press. I said slow, right? And then just yelling in my ear, telling me to go slower. What? I mean, draw me a lamp. Like, is it a desk lamp, a genie's lamp, a library lamp? Like, what do you mean? But I said lamp. I said slow. That's an inward opening door. Okay, inward to the room or in towards me? Like language. And so yet we use language because we're, quote, all speaking English, but the residue of the words does not necessarily mean the conveying of ideas, rather than the conveying of ideas to a person so they understand them, to then select them in the blink of an eye, when they don't go, hey, what did Brent tell me to do before? What does policy say? How did that, right? And now we're really learning to unpack this, what I would consider to be some very, very important skill sets for an instructor. I immediately R&D'd it, rip off and duplicated it from where I heard it. It was called Mr. CC. And so, like, if this was an instructor level trainer, honestly, like if you hired me to train instructors, one of the first things I come out and quote unquote teach is Mr. CC. And that stands for the meta model, rapport, congruence, and calibration. And so it's just 4 things that I believe any good communicator, which happens to be an instructor as well, professional communicator, but usually instructors are just like, I was good at wristy twisties, or I was good at shooting the plates, and now I've got instructor on my shirt. But that doesn't mean that you know how to convey that information into someone else's head so they can do it, heaven forbid, optimally, know to even look towards the elbow when the person's turning, rather than filter that information from the screaming and the low light and the radio and the other. Wow. And so we just kept, quote, throwing people into more and more, quote, stress, which I'm a very big fan of not talking about. I don't give someone stress. I can put pressure on them. The stress is what they feel. That would kind of get more into actually how do you apply these things talk. But yeah, so this idea of language, and then seeking first to understand. So by going, if I asked you a question or to perform something for me, armbar, wristy, shoot the thing, open the door, show me your threshold assessment, or what's the Tennessee, Garnt, whatever, right? And so the Graham factors or something, then as soon as you tell me or show me, I immediately know what to say or what experience to now put you in to get you closer to more optimal, because knowledge and skill builds on knowledge and skill, whether right. And so we have to link it together. And that's what I know how to do professionally. So this idea of language again, hey, so talk to me about that, Brent. What does that mean to you? How does that land? What pops up in your mind when I say inward opening door? Now, let's put that in an experience, right, where you're drilling and you got to pop the door, you let it breathe, you start doing a threshold assessment, you see someone on the inside, and then you do, zig to the right instead of zag to the left, whatever. You make a decision and do a movement. We can then use this language or this idea of Socratic questioning. Hey, back me up to this point. I noticed you make a decision here. What were you attending to? And people will be like, well, that's how you optimize decision making, is you back them up. Learning occurs in the debrief, but most of the time we just go carpal tunnel from high five and the shots were accurate, now go away. Or we go, hey, next time shoot better, and go away. And we never get them a run through as to how to do that better, rather than start to crack in to these unconscious behaviors and split second decisions that they don't even know they're making. And so that is the use of language as a tool to shape sense making or the meaning from what they're seeing to make split second decisions. I mean, that's what I do. Yeah.
That's awesome. So I'm going to put you on the spot for just a second.
Okay.
If somebody wanted to start going down that pathway, what are some good resources for them to get like the introductory feel of like, hey, like this is some deeper learning?
Well, yeah, that's a big question, right? Yeah. And so I would answer it the way I do everything. I would R&D a line from an amazing trainer, Brian Willis, and I would say adult diapers, right? It depends. Yep. And so I would ask them, so like, if we could just kind of sharpen it a little more, let's say like a law enforcement officer who's either in training or wants to train themselves or others better. So we're kind of going down that training route. Who wants to learn about things they didn't know, so to speak. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of great courses out there. And then, podcasts, again, well, I mean, Brian Willis has an entire, I think he's got over 500 podcasts with, world leaders in everything from safety to health to everything else.
Really? I didn't know that. I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, no, legit. I mean, you can, if you're a department, get it. It's like, whatever. It's not much, and all your instructors have access to it. But now that's overwhelming, right? Let's be honest, it is. So just pick one, listen to it as a group, or pick a part of one of them. And then that's where that's what I would want to talk to you about, right? So, okay, so we're going to take this one from Dr. Tim Lee. And either it's Brian Willis's or the Trainer's Bullpen, which is Chris Butler's podcast on Spotify and Apple and all the rest of it as well. But there's so many of them, right? I want you to deliberately be actionable and intentional with taking just even one thing and learning how to apply it. And that's my phrase. That's what I do. Apply, apply, apply it. And so there's these great courses, Methods of Instruction from Chris Butler, Raptor Protection. I mean, I helped teach it for a reason. It's got to be the best course I've ever been on for a massive deep dive into what, where, when, why, and how, the why behind it all. Now, how do you apply that, right? That's the point. There's an Advanced Instructional Methods course, AIM is called, from Force Science. I help teach that, because again, it's kind of taken the big box principles and now applying them into a lesson plan. And then my little island or niche is the guy who kind of just, how do you actually do that? Firearms training, defensive tactics training. I'm in a classroom only. I need better, not just test scores, but I need them to retain this and apply it in time compressed, ambiguous, high stakes environments or quote unquote scenarios and all the rest of it. And so I would say, like, I think probably the first trainer's bullpen is from Dr. Tim Lee. There's a really good article for free out there. And if you can't find it, maybe we can link to it, or just email me and I'll happily send it, from Dr. Tim Lee. It was in, like, the NTOA SWAT magazine, on this thing called desirable difficulties. And how can we put these things that make training more difficult, but they are desirable because they get better skills and knowledge and retention down the road. And just to start, I would say even just that article, right? Because it's just a couple of pages of an article. It's meant for cops and cool stuff, tactics and that rest of it, but it's rooted in research and evidence. And there's lots of other people that could then start talking about it. So just as one, that could be it. But another aspect that is absolutely foundational, in fact, I believe it's the very base of the pyramid, is this idea of emotional regulation. How do I, quote, manage my stress arousal? And that too maybe that's a good one for people. So whatever resonates with that person, I would just kind of pick one of these large things, guide them towards that, and then have a conversation with them about it. Hey, so what landed for you? How can you apply that? When I first learned it, honestly, I started applying these principles of training, my kids' soccer practice. And then I was like, well, this is easy. They're having a great time. Next thing you know, I'm doing it in DT, right? Defensive tactics. And then, how would this look in firearms? Well, right? And you just got more comfortable with it, confident and competent with it. So that's one of the things I'd love to continue doing, more on purpose or deliberate, is I just believe that there's no mentoring and coaching, like continued mentoring and coaching for law enforcement, especially for law enforcement trainers. And so that's why, like, if you bought my course, I try to send some material out ahead of time. Then we do the thing. Then afterward, there's like mandatory Zoom, a minimum of Zoom check-ins. Hey, 60 days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days later, you go, once you learn all this great info, go back to your department, get slapped in the face by 200 emails and the rest of it. What are you going to do to apply it? How are you going to grow and get your department to grow? Let me help you. Let's come together as a group, because we're not the only ones solving this problem. But each of our departments has different constraints and resources, right? We do or don't have full-time people. We do or don't have in-service. We do or don't have whatever it is. And so these are the conversations that I'm happy to have. So, it goes to all your viewers out there, whether you catch me in the hallway at ILETA or you just want to email me, happy to have those conversations.
That's awesome. You talked about Brian Willis, and I have not got to like pick his brain deeply. Yeah, I've met him in passing a couple times. ILETA, and he seems like a great guy. But can you just so everybody understands, ILETA is the International Law Enforcement Educators and Trainers Association. 2023, I believe. I don't even know how it was brought up to our agency, because none of us had ever went. And they were like, hey, do you want to go? Yeah, let's go. And it was the most eye-opening conference I've ever been to. That's where I met you. But there's just so much flow of good information and just new ideas and so many different classes. And your first time going, it really is like drinking from a fire hose, because you're like, well, where do I go? Like, which class do I pick? And this past year was my second time going, and I made sure to get my hotel in time so that way I could stay on site this time. And it was just even better experience because I got to network this time and just actually meet these people after class hours, And so if anybody ever gets to go, I encourage you to stay on site. But can you just talk about the organization of like how it's just built for the flow of information and ideas, and like how these ideas get passed back and forth and just get made better? It's such a great organization and conference.
Yeah, it is. It's the one that I try very hard to hit every year. Honestly, I do. And we all pay our own way to go. I've been paying my own way to go to it every single year, and it's kind of like I feel like it's kind of like a battery recharge, because I get to touch base with a bunch of the people there who are you walk down the hallway and that guy wrote that book and that guy's been doing it for 30 years and that guy has that course and just all that stuff, and they're totally open to discussing and talking, and so that's pretty wonderful. I mean, the conference itself, but I mean, to be an iLead member, you just become a member. You get a journal. I want to say it's at least 4 times a year. We've written articles. You just wrote an article.
Yeah.
I just read. Congratulations, by the way. I know
Thank you.
I kind of was pushing you to do that, and I'm really
Yes.
happy you did. Contribute, right?
Hey,
And,
you just ruined my ending because I was going to give you a big thank you at the end.
well, no. Now the problem is you've done it. So now,
Yeah.
now I'm wanting one a year for sure, right?
Yep.
Yeah. But So I mean, there's value even if you can't make the conference, is what I'm saying. There's iLead Lives, and they do. I can't remember if it's on Facebook or what it is, but there's always interviews and all that stuff, and it all exists. And so you're really, a lot of organizations talk that way, and a lot of people talk that way, but iLead lives it in that you're 0 degrees of separation from these people, and like people have helped me, with their own time, just, hey, on a whatever, this is how to do PowerPoint even better, or stuff like that, right? And
Structure Z.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And just all sorts of things. And so it's also a place for trainers to grow, meaning, go and present. You might only have 4 or 5 people in there because there's 60 presentations on at the same time. And when you've got somebody who wrote the book, the most likely people are going to that. But at the same time, you learn, people will be in your class. If you ask them to, they will give you their honest critique and feedback of your information and delivery. And you can't help but just grow as an instructor, presenter, and the rest of it too. So, I think it's wonderful that way as well. It's the largest, so it's for all law enforcement instruction, classroom only, hands-on wristy twisties, whatever, armors, firearms, all that stuff. And it's once a year. I can't remember this year. It's usually in March.
Yeah.
I just block it off right away and try to go in. And it's in Minneapolis, St. Paul, or St. Louis. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I've got conferences in my brain, but yeah, it's a beautiful location and stuff. So I can't say enough good about it, and the people involved in it. Just like all volunteers, all trying to make this thing grow. Multiple sessions, from live fire at the range to many classroom-based sessions and things like that. And they're not just infomercials either, right? For like, come to my training. They're trying to give you value. If you want to take more or whatever because you've got more training, then of course, I mean, that's an idea of it too. But yeah.
That's awesome. And guys, I highly encourage you, like he said, just even join so you can get the journals and the podcasts and stuff like that they put out, because there's just so much content and information that they put out on a regular basis. It's awesome. I like Jeff said, he pushed me to write an article. I got my first one published last week. Him and Dan helped me refine it, and it's just something I would have never thought I would have came out of my comfort zone and did. And I did, and now I can say, hey, I've got an article published in a police journal. That's another thing I want to talk about. So before I forget, thank you to you and Dan, because without you guys helping me and pushing me, I would have never done it. So thank you. I truly mean that.
Well, Dan is Dan Fraser, for those of you who don't know him. Well, you'll probably have Dan on if you haven't already.
Yep.
And he's a wonderful mentor in this space of, like, because he's written a book. He's amazing at presentations and that kind of stuff, right? Just a fun guy. And so he'll really help you, I'm sure. I just kind of pushed you towards Dan, and then he probably took Paul and the rest of it, which is what he does. So can't help but learn and grow.
Yeah, like I told you, I'm working on my doctorate, and he gave me the most resonating advice I've ever had in writing in a persuasive article. And I was like, he just dumbed it down so much for me that it clicked immediately. And I was like, oh my God. I had writer's block for 2 weeks. I didn't know how to touch, because he was like, hey man, this is a great academic article, but if you want people to read it, he's like, change it up a little bit. And I was literally at ILETA, and it was like 11 o'clock at night. I was fixing to go to bed, and I was like, I have an idea. And I knocked it out within an hour. And he got back to me after the conference, like, hey, that's really good. And I was like, he's like, do you want to add anything to it? I said, nope. I said, I leave it as is, like, because it just came to me. And I don't know how to explain it, but one night I had the creative juices flowing, and I was like, it's time to knock this out.
Well, but isn't that like learning itself, right? So you were learning, you were pushed outside of your comfort zone, emotional regulation as well, right? So that vulnerability piece is massive. Putting yourself in a position where you didn't know if you had the skills and resources and the rest of it. Then it was challenging you to think in a new way, probably getting you to reverse engineer it. Hey, what do you want people to be able to take away? What do you want people to be able to do? Is this just that was fun to read, or is there an actionable piece? Whatever, right? But that's what I'm reverse engineering it. And now, how do we break it down into simple flow, into easy concepts for and deliver those? So you had this epiphany quote one day, but it's just like riding a bike, right? You couldn't ride a bike, couldn't ride a bike, couldn't ride a bike, couldn't ride a bike, and then all of a sudden you woke up and you rode a bike, because those neurons, right, literally connected. That information that you were kind of pondering, right, and letting it percolate, which percolation is actually a thing, finally connected with an idea, and then it was it, right? The hard work was done prior to it. And so that's exactly what we're talking about with physical skill sets. That's exactly what we're talking about with learning and knowledge and retention. That's exactly it. If you have this like confusion, means you're learning something. Frustration means you're on the verge of a breakthrough, because those neurons, those handshakes, as I call them, they've never connected before, because you're learning something new. Hence the desirable difficulty in this training. How do we get people to tuck in to being process, not outcome focused? I mean, I can't help but just start talking like this, but like that's the how, right? So those are the actionable pieces that we gotta make fun and purposeful. And like training should be fun and learning should be fun, but it's also this stressy agitation kind of friction, because why is it so hard? Yeah, you don't remember driving a car was like that for a long period of time, and now all of a sudden you don't even think about it anymore. Like that kind of stuff. Yeah, for sure. So awesome.
Yep. I want to talk to you one more thing, and then I'll let you wrap. I don't want to tie you up all day. How did you finally decide? Because you've wrote so many articles, and I actually got on your website while we were doing this, and I've downloaded the two you talked about, and so I'm going to read those hopefully in the next couple of days. But how did you decide that, like, I want to start writing articles? That seems like for a lot of cops, like the mountaintop. You're like, oh, I can't do that. Like, how did you get into it and say, you know what, I'm going to be able to convey my message in written form? Like, how did Jeff Johnsgaard get there?
Yeah, so that's not the answer may surprise you in that I didn't want to. And so in order to get the U.S. government to give you a special abilities visa and or green card, imagine down the road, you have to show that you have a special ability in the area of XYZ. Now, that's easy when you're a geofracker or a heart surgeon or a whatever and a whatever, because there's literally a list of requirements any of us can go on and look up, and those don't exist in law enforcement. They don't. I mean, like, anyway. And so I had to start creating, like, do you have a book? Do you have a textbook? I don't have a textbook, right? And so I started writing because I had to get quote unquote known, and I had to get it out there. And so then a friend of mine hooked me up with Colonel Grossman, who's written many books.
Yep.
And Colonel Grossman gave me some tips on, you're going to bore these people to death, and how are you writing and things like that. And so my early articles, of which I have an entire page of on my old website. In fact, now that you say that, I forgot. What I'll do, I'll put the links to all those other ones, because I have tons and tons of other articles. As I said, I just rebranded. And so I've got two newer ones out right now, game intelligence and this threat to challenge states, right? And so, because that's a emotional regulation and actually learning to apply it via theater of the mind or performance enhancement imagery is what Brian Willis calls it. I don't want to bogart his concept, so I just call it mental rehearsal. But anyway, and so super important stuff. We're doing it all the time. I want people to use it on purpose. And so I started writing articles on things that were interesting to me that I thought would hopefully convey some value. And so it was like ILEADA and a bunch of organizations. And but at the same time, I was actually trying to get quote unquote articles published as a show for that. So that I could get work permits and things, right? And so then it metamorphosized into, maybe being able to do it a little better, hearing from people such as yourself saying, hey, like I found some value in that. Oh, okay. Well, that's good. How can I do that even more deliberately or better? Yeah. And so I have to admit that it's not my favorite venue, but to put out a few ideas, and then to get people maybe kind of thinking about them, and then maybe now meeting them at a course or having them contact me because they digested them or they have some questions on them. I mean, hey, why not? Podcasts as well. I mean, that's why I'm on here, is just to just expose, some ideas, and if those resonate, hopefully people will ask more, and the whole community will grow. The rising tide floats all boats, right? Yep. And so that's the idea. Yeah. Intuitively, I guess I was pushed outside my comfort zone. So I'm talking like, Brent, I'm not kidding. Like 15 years minimum, every single coffee break in the morning, while my mates were off, having a coffee, once a month, I would get together with my friends, and every single other coffee break, I was writing something, training something, or doing something. And I just outworked other people. And I just committed that time for personal growth and for growth, right? And trying to be more optimal. And so I've never been gifted at any of it. And I just kind of outworked you, so to speak.
I would disagree wholeheartedly with that, because you have a natural gift.
Well, I appreciate that very much, brother. But
well, yeah. Hey, I don't want to tie you up. If anybody wants to reach out to Jeff and learn more about your courses, your instructional methods class, where can they find you?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. So my email is simply jeff@onpurpose.training. So I bought the URL .training. And then, there's as I said, a couple of free articles in the shop and some other stuff. If you're civilian or if you're in law enforcement, there's lots of stuff that way. But I mean, at the end of the day, you can reach out even just with questions. Certainly an easy way to get me there. Again, onpurpose.training is the website, and jeff@onpurpose.training is the email.
Awesome. And I want to add one thing to this before we officially wrap up. He's full-time trainer, guys. He's got a bunch of paid classes on there too. So if you want to host them for training, you can find the information on there as well. Bring him to your city or state.
Well, that is what I do, Ed. So I believe that 80% of the time, it's 80% of the course is the same, but there's 10, 15, 20% that's different. I don't believe in universal solutions for universal problems. And so my superpower, right, is the ability to tweak like real time based on who's in front of me in that class, but specifically if that's an agency or a whatever, that kind of thing, like really specifically, so you get the most return on investment benefit afterward. Yeah, man, I mean, I'm just about getting after it in a world-class way and continuing to do that as much as I can.
Awesome. Jeff, it's been my pleasure. You're always welcome on the show, and we'll definitely be in contact, okay? Have a great day.
Sure. Well, you too, brother. The pleasure's mine, and in the future we'll dial in specifically on something, maybe threat to challenge or whatever, just so some of your viewers have maybe some actionable, how would I be able to do that kind of stuff, because that's what I'm about.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.